This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, all things Cleveland sports, with your host, John Suchan. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're listening to us. This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, and we are part of the Fanatical Elves Network, part of Fans First Sports Network, and we're recording this on a Tuesday evening, May 20th. And if you're watching us right now on YouTube, on the X, on Facebook, you might notice that I have a guest this week. Very excited to have Kevin Smith, who's part of Fans First Sports Network and also the Pittsburgh affiliate. Welcome, Kevin. How are you?
Hey, John. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, you mentioned the Pittsburgh affiliate, but we're on good terms, John and I, so this will be civil.
Well, I wanted Kevin to come on. I had an opportunity to talk to Kevin last week on his one program, and we talked about the Brownies and some different things there, and it was a great time. And I think I had talked to you at some point a year ago, maybe, or whatnot. But anyway, long story short, that Kevin Smith here has a connection a little bit with Kevin Stefanski, the Browns coach. And I thought it would be fun to not only talk about Cleveland and Pittsburgh, but also I wanted your insights on Kevin Stefanski, because us Browns fans, we tend to talk a lot about Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, the owners. We just repeatedly talk about these things. And so you've had an opportunity to meet with him. I'd like to talk a little bit about that momentarily, but can you give people just a sense of your background? I know you work for FFSN and what you do with the Pittsburgh affiliate.
Yeah, so I have had the opportunity now to come on board full-time with Fans First. I did 33 years as a public school history and government teacher, 30 years as a head football coach, or 30 years as a football coach, the last 14 as the head football coach at Ocean City High School in Southern New Jersey, beautiful little community on the beach. And as the Fans First opportunity began to grow, and my years dwindled down as a teacher, it seemed like a great opportunity to make the switch. So now I'm full-time on the Fans First affiliate, working for Steel Curtain Network as well. And I do a daily podcast called The Call Sheet, which runs Monday through Friday. And you were my guest a couple weeks ago. It was a great conversation.
Yeah. Well, I don't like you, Pittsburgh, for your football team, but I have always respected you guys have done a great job with FSN and just supporting all the affiliates. And, we couldn't get started without you. So I had started my Johnny Cleveland podcast prior to that and talking to people like Jeff and whatnot, Brian. They helped us get on board. We created the Fanatical Elves Network out of that. And so we've got a great group of colleagues and contributors here for our programming. So we're just excited to be working alongside everybody. So you were talking about, you're from New Jersey, and I know it from the high school. By the way, Kevin has multiple state championships in New Jersey. Congratulations. And his coaching experience last summer, or give us a little background on this. You got to meet Kevin Stefanski in part because he was there kind of in that area. So if you want to kind of go into that first part, because you have an opportunity to talk to Kevin one-on-one a couple times. How did that all start for you?
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski grew up outside of Philadelphia. His family had vacation property in Ocean City, so he spent a lot of his summers in the town where I live now and coach. And he returned just about every summer for vacation. And it just so happens that this past year, I wound up coaching his nephew, and when he would come down to the area, we, through mutual friends, were able to develop a friendship. He'd come to our high school in the mornings in the summer when he was in Ocean City to work out. He'd use our weight room, and I'd sit in there with him and just pick his brain. He was wonderful, absolutely wonderful in sharing his knowledge of the game with me, talking about scheme. We'd get on the whiteboard, we'd draw stuff up. We'd talk about problem solving. And then, you would talk about a generous guy and no ego. he would then come to our practices in the morning and summer workouts and get on the field and just work with our quarterbacks. He didn't even tell a lot of the guys who he was. I mean, eventually they figured it out, but it wasn't like he didn't come in and big time anybody. So it was a great experience just being able to work with him a little bit.
I just think about his background. He was this lifelong, he played at Penn, if I don't have that correct. Then he became like an assistant coach, and then he was in Minnesota forever as one of their assistants. Eventually became their offensive coordinator for a year or two, correct?
Yep.
And now, has gone into Cleveland, and I think he's in year 6 here now, which is quite the feat if you know anything about Cleveland Browns coaches. 3 decades. So, I mean, there's a lot of conversation about that because we compare ourselves to you guys, to the AFC North teams like the Steelers. You have a coach that's been there for a long time, Mike Tomlin. You've had some success. Obviously, I want to kind of get into that, what type of success you've had. But the Browns and the Browns fans are trying to find that here. And now Kevin Stefanski's in year 6. You've had an opportunity to talk to him the one time. It was about a year ago that you interviewed him, I think, or before the season started. I'm sure there were a lot of high hopes. The Browns are coming off an 11-win season. Joe Flacco was Flacco mania. We were all excited, but I was cautious going into the season because they had some success, but prior to that, they were some not so good seasons. Under Kevin Stefanski, he hit it out of the park in 2020 with the pandemic. Everything was going well. The Browns made it to the playoffs, but then they had a few down years. So that you got to interview him over a year ago. Tell us a little about. Do you recall much about that interview and anything that stood out to you, like going into that season? And then, obviously the season didn't pan out the way that we all wanted it to.
He sat down with me last summer for my podcast. It's on YouTube. If you just Google or if you just search it on YouTube, The Call Sheet with Kevin Stefanski. And we sat down. We actually were in the weight room of our high school where we did the interview. And we talked mostly about quarterback play. I mean, I really wanted to get into and pick his brain about quarterbacks and what's he value in quarterbacks and how does he train them? What does he look for, et cetera. And we talked a little bit about the Browns, and he made an interesting point. He said, every season is new. Every season presents its own set of challenges. And more than anything in the NFL, you have to stay healthy. And we know that sounded almost foreboding now when you think about Cleveland's season last year and the amount of injuries that they went through. And then obviously the difficulty that they experienced at the quarterback position. It's the most important position in all of sports. And, Cleveland's really struggled to either A, find a true franchise guy, or B, keep their guys healthy. So that was it. Picking his brain about the quarterback position was fantastic. And, I know we're going to talk in a minute about Cleveland's quarterbacks now, but I think some of the insight he gave in that interview led to some of the decisions that they made this offseason.
Well, and you also had an opportunity to talk to him at the Combine in February, which I found interesting what you told me last week about that insight about Stefanski, picking his brain too then about the quarterbacks and what he was looking for. You mentioned this to me last week. He was looking for a couple things. And so when we talk about the Dylan Gabriel pick for the Brownies at pick in the 3rd round at pick 94 or whatnot, it was a bit of a surprise to a lot of us Browns fans. None of us had Dylan Gabriel on our bingo card. But you said that when your conversation with him back in February, that was like Dylan Gabriel's name was discussed, or at least that type of quarterback was discussed.
So when I interviewed him last July, one of the questions I asked him was, what do you value most in a quarterback?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think about things like arm strength that comes to, or size or mobility. But he said accuracy and decision-making, and the ability to process from the pocket because of how fast the NFL game is, that the biggest struggle that college quarterbacks often face when when they make the transition to the NFL is that they just can't process information fast enough. And that he really believes that that is what sets quarterbacks apart. So when Dylan Gabriel's name was announced at the draft as their pick in round 3, I know a lot of people were shocked by that, but quite honestly, having studied all these quarterbacks and I was at the combine, et cetera.
Yeah.
Those are the things that Dylan Gabriel's biggest strengths, that his accuracy and his decision-making. So it made sense for me as a Kevin Stefanski pick.
When you did meet with him, didn't you say you met with him and Tommy Rees or lunch or something?
Yeah, I had lunch with Kevin Stefanski. Tommy Rees was there.
Pretty nice company.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was wild. We walked into this cafe, which I guess is like the spot to be at the combine.
Yeah.
And it was like a who's who of the NFL. It was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, oh my God, there's the head coach. There's the head coach. Here's the Peter Schrager from, NFL Network. And it was pretty cool. Kevin Stefanski spoke incredibly highly of Tommy Rees, about his football IQ. I mean, he was calling plays for Nick Saban when he was in his 20s.
Yeah. So you see him as a coach for sure in the future. Tommy Rees.
He's going to be on the provided obviously things stay on schedule. You never know, but provided he stays on the track he's on, he will be a head coaching candidate, a la Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore was kind of the boy wonder. Yes. And now he's the head coach in New Orleans with a Super Bowl ring on his finger. So I think that, I'm not wishing that for the Browns necessarily, the Super Bowl ring, but I think that Tommy Rees is a guy.
Give us one. Come on, Kevin, give us one.
I won't be mad. I would be very happy for Kevin Stefanski. I would be. But
it's such a neat
Tommy Rees on that track.
It's a nice thing that you have that connection. It really is cool. So, and I think, so this has led to the Browns now having this quarterback carousel or 4 quarterbacks. You were asking me this question last week. So I want to know your perspective on it. I just mentioned off air, I think we were saying how the Browns have this beat writer, Mary Kay Cabot. I don't care for her, but she's always saying stuff. And recently she just said that Kenny Pickett, your former Steeler quarterback, and Dylan Gabriel are probably 1, 2. Joe Flacco and Shedeur Sanders are 3, 4 in that kind of that order. And I just wanted your thoughts on, I know you don't follow the Browns as much as the Steelers, but how do you see this? If you think about, because you experienced some time with Kenny Pickett, and you know a little bit about Joe Flacco being in the AFC North. What are your thoughts on it, and how do you think it's all going to pan out in your opinion?
I thought that was a very interesting preliminary depth chart, if you want to call it that. I would suspect that they want to see what do they really have in Kenny Pickett, because he was the starting quarterback for the Steelers for the better part of a season and a half. He did some good things, but the things that he did best were often improvisational. They were when he got out of the pocket and he could kind of make some things happen. He did not have a great pocket presence. He was a little bit skittish in the pocket. He was quick to bail. Now the Steelers rushed him into the starting lineup. He was definitely a quarterback who needed to sit and learn for a little bit, but they didn't have that luxury because they brought in Mitch Trubisky and he was terrible. And so 3.5 games in, I mean, they literally put Kenny Pickett into the lineup at halftime of the 4th game.
It's not as bad as Charlie Fry years ago for the Brownies.
I remember that name. Yeah.
University of Akron. I think he lasted a half in week 1. Anyway. Okay.
But I guess my point is, I think Kenny Pickett would have benefited from some time to sort of sit on the sidelines and study, but they threw him into the fire. If he has progressed as a pocket passer, he's got some good tools. And I think that's what they probably want to find out right away. Where is he? Because they're going to have to make a decision on one of these guys. You know what you have in Flacco. You don't need to give Joe Flacco 1 million reps. You know what you have.
Right.
And I would imagine, let's see what we have in Pickett. They're going to give Dylan Gabriel more reps than Shedeur Sanders, probably because of the draft slot. That makes sense as well. So I wasn't really surprised when I saw the way that it was listed.
Sure.
But I think the big thing, I think the decision's got to come on Pickett before it comes on anybody else.
And that decision probably won't be made. I mean, if we go with that basis, then Kenny Pickett starts the season. But my question, like going into the preseason, we already know what we have in Joe Flacco. we want to see more about Pickett, but do they play Pickett in the Browns preseason games? There's 3 of them. There's 2 away, 1 home. I'm interested to see how they do that. I mean, a lot of us here in Cleveland have been saying, don't even play either of those guys. We already kind of know what we got. We should be playing the rookies to let Dylan Gabriel and Sanders really, see what they can do. But of course, it's preseason, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I'm going to use a Mike Tomlin phrase.
Yeah.
I would say that Kenny Pickett right now is in the pole position.
Yes.
That's like how Tomlin likes to context it, which means you're going to get the first look, but that guarantees you nothing.
Yes.
And of course, I think it's a true training camp competition. And I believe that while Pickett might be in the pole position, then if he doesn't prove that he can be the guy, they can always fall back on Joe Flacco.
Okay.
Because they're going to I would be shocked if Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders started week 1.
Okay.
Does that make, do you share that sentiment?
I do. Yeah. I would, I'm a fan of Shedeur Sanders, and I believe that he could be a really good quarterback. But like you have already said too, Dylan Gabriel, I'll give him an opportunity. I think Browns fans are just enamored with the fact that we have this high profile kid from Colorado. His dad was that's how we kind of think about it. Dylan Gabriel's we think of him as small. No one had him on their bingo card. But you said, he was high on probably the Browns depth chart, and that's why they took him, 50 picks higher than Dylan Gabriel. So yeah, I'd rather see like Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel, like let them kind of build it up into the season. Like, I don't want to throw them to the fire. Like if Kenny Pickett, let's say, starts and he can roll through that first, if he can roll through the season, like let the other guys sit. Now, I don't know what they're going to, or do they keep both rookies? Do they keep one on the practice squad? Like what's going to happen there? Do they keep 3 on the roster and protect those 3 and then let Flacco, go somewhere else again? I don't know.
That's kind of the fascinating competition here, because I could be totally wrong about this, but in my mind, it's almost like you need Flacco on the roster because he's the known quantity.
Yeah.
Pickett, while he's got some starting experience, 2 teams have already given up on him. Mm-hmm. So that's not a great sign. If he has progressed. Now, maybe that year in Philly under Kellen Moore sitting behind Jalen Hurts, maybe that really did some wonders for him. But if he can't get it done, if they're not convinced early on that he's the guy, it feels like to me he's the one you cut, because you just spent 2 draft picks on developmental guys, and you need to develop them or see if you can.
Yeah.
And Flacco's the known quantity. I think they'd prefer to keep Kenny Pickett because obviously he's younger.
Right.
But Flacco is a safety net that Kevin Stefanski is probably comfortable with.
I like that. Hey, I want to pick your brain on Aaron Rodgers right here after the break. This is the Johnny Cleveland podcast, part of the Fanatical Elves Network, and Fans First will be right back. Hey, thank you for coming back to the Johnny Cleveland podcast. We have our special guest, Kevin Smith of Fans First Sports Network and part of the Pittsburgh affiliate. Had an opportunity to talk to Kevin a week ago on his show, and have invited Kevin tonight. And we've been talking about Kevin Stefanski and the Browns quarterback carousel. Now the Steelers, still their name is tied to Aaron Rodgers, the savvy old-time vets. Where is that right now in your mind? Is that still going to happen? Could it happen? Is it just talk? Is Aaron Rodgers just what?
Everything the Pittsburgh Steelers have done this offseason indicates that they're fairly confident that Aaron Rodgers will eventually sign with them. Because if he's not, then they haven't really thought out the quarterback position very well.
Well, my next questions are about Mason Rudolph.
The current quarterback room in Pittsburgh is Mason Rudolph, Skylar Thompson, and Will Howard.
Another K-Stater and Ohio State Buckeye, which I'm sure that's an ongoing conversation here in Cleveland. You probably know this, but it is annoying as hell, the Browns fans, that every single draft for years, the Steelers pick the Buckeyes because they know the Buckeyes are going to be good, decent players. They got Will Howard and some other guys too, I think, this year. The Browns always
Jack
pass.
Sawyer.
Every
Sawyer's a
year.
Columbus legend.
It drives us like, anyway. Okay. So you think Aaron Rodgers is going to be there?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Aaron Rodgers will sign on a 1-year deal. I think the Steelers will try to see what they have in Will Howard. I love Will Howard. I love Will Howard.
Oh, yeah.
Will Howard's another guy, Philadelphia area guy who's trained in Ocean City, and I've had an opportunity to talk to. Will Howard is a huge individual. He's listed at 6'5", 245. That is a gigantic man. That's Ben Roethlisberger size.
Yes.
And when you talk to him in person, he is a large, large man. And the Steelers like big pocket quarterbacks. So I'm interested to see what they have in him.
I love big pocket. Browns fans love big pocket. Why does somebody like your buddy Kevin Stefanski, who you just had talked to, why doesn't he and Andrew Berry see the same thing that you guys see as an organization, as Steeler fans? It drives us mad. It doesn't make sense. You just like, that's what you need, don't you, in the AFC North?
It is a division that feels like the certain style of play would lend itself to a bigger, stronger guy. But I mean, look at Baltimore, man. They've been the kings of the division for several years now with Lamar Jackson. But you're right. Cleveland, they have a big guy in Joe Flacco. He's not leaving the pocket. We know that. But that's not necessarily a good thing, I don't think, at this point.
Now, Will Howard, you said you had an opportunity to talk to him?
Yeah.
I've told you my background. I mean, Will Howard played at K-State for 4 years, and I lived in Wichita and out there in Kansas for years, and so followed his path. He was not anything super special. When he came into Ohio State last year, my friends and family from Kansas State and stuff said, well, have fun with Will Howard. The thing is that Will Howard had an exceptionally talented group of wide receivers and other athletes around him when he got to Ohio State. And I think obviously he's elevated his game. But you're excited to see what he can do. Do you think that they're going to throw him in like all of preseason and really give the fans a lot to see there? How do you expect that to work out for you guys?
I mean, if Rodgers signs, which again, I expect him to, he probably won't play a lot early on. And so you'll get a good opportunity to work Mason Rudolph in and then probably see what you have in Will Howard. The thing I think is interesting about Will Howard, when I was at the Combine, Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, when he was being interviewed by the media, he raved about Will Howard's leadership, about how after Ohio State lost that game to Michigan to end the regular season, guys were devastated. And that Will Howard and Jack Sawyer, who is also now in Pittsburgh, the two of them basically pulled that team up, sort of from out of the doldrums and emotionally and mentally rallied them for that championship run. And I just, this is a personal thing. I personally value leadership in quarterbacks.
Well, you're a good coach. You've won 3 state championships. Why doesn't Kevin Stefanski in the NFL not get that? Like, I'm sorry,
I think I'm sure he gets it.
So the Browns could have gotten Will Howard. The Browns could have gotten Jack Sawyer, but they passed on these guys. Why did they? Like, is it just because when you're going into the draft like that, you're set on certain, like you're looking at value and the pick? I mean, is that what it just comes down to?
Well, a lot of teams were not down on, but devalued Jack Sawyer because they just didn't think from a scheme fit perspective that he was athletic enough or bent well enough to be a 3-4 edge. And he wasn't big enough to be a 4-3 edge. He was like that tweener type, which can cause you to slip in the draft at times.
Sure.
And Will Howard had a terrible combine workout. And I don't know how much stock people put in that. It was surreal. I almost felt bad for the guy. So the combine's in Indianapolis. A bunch of Ohio State fans show up because there were like 15 Buckeyes at the combine.
Yeah.
A bunch of Michigan fans are there.
Okay.
I mean, the place was packed for the quarterback workout. You would have thought that there was an actual game going on. And every single time Will Howard came up to throw, the Michigan fans booed him.
Oh, geez.
And so it actually became like a thing between the two fan bases. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's had a job interview and he's getting booed,
Right. Oh my God.
So he didn't handle it great. He didn't handle it. So maybe some teams, I don't know, maybe they moved him down their board.
Yeah. Well, I'm anxious to see how he does. My fear, obviously, many Browns fears is what you've already said, is that, Will Howard's going to turn into the next Big Ben. and that's what the Browns passed on, and we're going to have to deal with Will Howard as a Pittsburgh Steeler for years to come, and that just doesn't sit well with many of us. So, congratulations on drafting.
I'm not holding my breath on that, but if it happens, I won't be mad, John.
That's true. I'm not. Yeah. Okay. That's just my nightmare scenario. Okay. So Mason Rudolph, you think right now is sort of like he's the guy, but not really. Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be there in your estimation.
I believe so. I think the Steelers, if they had to go through the season with Mason Rudolph, they would probably cobble together, 8 or 9 or 10 wins the way that they usually do. But that's obviously not the long-term plan. Pittsburgh's in the same boat Cleveland's in that neither one of them knows who the long-term answer is at quarterback. If you fast forward 3 years, who is it? I think both teams hope that guy's on the roster, but neither one knows.
What about Mike Tomlin? In your mind, he's been there for a long time. Is he safe? People talk about how the Steelers get to a certain point, they get to the playoffs, or they just get over that 500 record, but then they don't go anywhere past that. And you get a lot of frustrated Steeler fans.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's a lot of Steeler fans that would be happy to see Mike Tomlin go because of the lack of postseason success. I love Mike Tomlin. I think he's a tremendous motivator. I think he handles personnel extremely well. Obviously, the Steelers need to do better in the playoffs. Their last 5 playoff appearances have been abysmal. It's been over by halftime in 5 straight playoff games. That's embarrassing. But the fact that they're there every year, that they're in the conversation every year, the fact that they were able to transition away from Ben Roethlisberger into whatever's next while still being able to make the playoffs and be competitive, there aren't many franchises that can do that. When the franchise guy leaves, most franchises bottom out. And Pittsburgh's – and in a way, that's kind of a curse because they've kept themselves from getting into position to maybe draft the next franchise guy.
Yeah.
But I'll take it. I'll take being interesting and competitive every year.
So would we. Okay. So you talked a little bit. We were talking off air. We both drafted some really good running backs. You got Caleb Johnson. We got Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson, which were here in Cleveland. I mean, I'm writing an article about the next 1-2 punch here for the Brownies in the run game. You guys like this Caleb. What do you like about Caleb Johnson?
I like the scheme fit. The Steelers had Najee Harris for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
But it was, he was more of a gap back. Like Najee Harris does best when he's got a puller out in front of him and he knows exactly what hole he's going to hit. I think he'll do well with the Chargers because they're that style of run game. But the Steelers are a zone-based game, which you need a little more vision, a little more feel, a little more patience. And that's what Caleb Johnson was trained in at Iowa.
Yes.
And so I love his scheme fit. I love the 2 backs that the Browns drafted. I think that's an excellent combination. I think Judkins is your downhill banger. And now Sampson's got a little more glide and a little more smoothness and a little more explosiveness. So that's a nice combination.
Yes. Okay. I want to play. Let's jump. A couple things. Let's talk about the rest of the AFC North. And I also want to look at the schedule of the Browns and the Steelers. Your overall assessment of where things are things similar to where they've been this year? Is Baltimore the favorite? Is Cincinnati going to be dependent on Joe Burrow? Where do you see it falling? Obviously, we can look at the schedule here in a minute, but how confident are you with your Steelers this year, with what Mike Tomlin's going to be doing with the new running game, with Will Howard on board, with Aaron Rodgers coming on board potentially? Where are you at with Pittsburgh and the AFC North?
To me, Baltimore's still the favorite. I mean, they're always smart in the offseason. They always manage to draft well. They know when to move away from guys, et cetera. So I don't think that anything's changed there. I think the Steelers are going to win between 8 and 10 games. I think you or I could play quarterback and they'd win between 8 and 10 games. They're just Pittsburgh's solid up front, and they've made some good moves in the offseason as well. They're not going to be good enough at quarterback to make a deep run, but they'll probably, again, be in that conversation.
Okay.
Cincinnati better win a lot of 44-38 games, man. Because my goodness, they have put all the money on one side of the ball.
Yes.
And I didn't like their draft pick, their number 1 pick, the Shamar Stewart kid. I just think he's a boomer bust guy. And if you're a boomer bust guy, you better go to a franchise that has great culture, and that has not ever been Cincinnati. So
how do you describe the Browns culture then? How do you, similarly to the Cincinnati, or how do you look at that?
I think the biggest problem that Cleveland has had, and they're kind of like getting away from this, is the instability, the constant turnover. I mean, the two most important things are your head coach and your quarterback. Well, Cleveland has had just a carousel of head coaches and quarterbacks. So I don't even know if they've even had enough stability to be able to build a culture. For me, culture is what are the norms and the habits that are expected of everybody on the team, right? How do you practice? How do you approach film and meeting rooms, right? And if you're constantly changing the head coach and the quarterback, you never really get to establish that. I think it's great that Kevin Stefanski's been there 6 years because I think he's a very good coach. And I also think that he's now at least got the opportunity to build something there. So,
I think what's interesting, and you've been a coach for a long time, that what annoys Browns fans when they talk about Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, and I've said this too, is that they say the same thing in these pre-game or post-game pressers, and it's just coaching talk, and it's just drives fans crazy because we want to see our coaches. Some of us want to see Browns coaches with more passion because they think that a more passionate coach will somehow make this Browns team more successful. We've had all the different types of coaches in Cleveland over the last 20, 30 years. So, what do you say to all that?
Philly fans ran Andy Reid out of town for the same exact reason. They hated that he gave the canned answers at every press conference. They couldn't wait to get rid of Andy Reid. And he's obviously gone on and done great things. But I won't read too much into any of that. I know coaches who absolutely hate to talk to any kind of media because they know every little thing that they say is going to be parsed over and dissected and read into. And that's the last thing that they want to do is provide those sound bites or those nuggets.
Yeah. Hey, I want to bring up this schedule of the Steelers. I'm sure you've looked at it. Did you like to go through the schedule and are you like a game by game predictor? Or do you don't do that? How do you, when you look at the schedule, I mean, that's what Browns fans tend to do. They're like, that's a win, that's a loss. How do you, when you Steeler fans look at it, or how do you assess this?
I mean, a couple of thoughts. I like to do that intellectually. You know it's going to change because injuries and what have you are going to pop up. But I know this about the Steelers. They are guaranteed to win one game that you expect them to lose on the schedule, and to lose one game you expect them to win. Every single, like that game in Cleveland last year that they lost in the snow to the Browns. I mean, all Steelers fans felt like, oh, well, we should sweep the Browns. Well, no. There's always going to be that game. And if I knew what game it was going to be, I would love it. But I look at Pittsburgh's schedule and I say to myself, they need to be 3-1 when they get to the bye, because I think on paper, they're as good or better than all four of those teams that they start the season with. And then their schedule gets more difficult as you go. So getting off to a good start would certainly help them. Okay.
So they have like you said, the bye in week 5. In week 4, you're out there in London. The Browns play the same Minnesota Vikings team in week 5 when you have that bye. So you get to play them first. We get to play them second.
I think that's a good schedule set up there for the Browns to get, because Minnesota's in Ireland and then they're in London, and you get them on the back end when they're probably fatigued and ready.
So your game's in Ireland? Is that where they? Okay.
Ireland, yeah.
So then they both come back. We play each other that first week, and Browns fans are already guaranteeing a loss. The week coming back from London, but maybe
Mike Tomlin is like 15-2 or something like that off of the bye week. So.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Kevin.
I'm just providing information there, John.
Awesome. No, you guys have a lot of primetime games, unlike Cleveland Browns this year. Some fans are saying we don't have any primetime games here in Cleveland, but you have what, like 4 or 5? It looks like maybe.
Yeah, you know how Aaron Rodgers is coming?
Yes.
Week 1, the Jets, and then
Yes.
week 8 in prime time against Green Bay. That's how he's coming to Pittsburgh.
Absolutely. I didn't even see. I knew about week 1, but I didn't take a look at your schedule on Green Bay until you just said that. So that makes sense. Yeah, really. Okay. So, I mean, you're looking at the Pittsburgh will be over the 500 mark in all likelihood. You like Mike Tomlin. You don't think he's going anywhere. That's good. What year is this for him?
I believe this is 18, I believe.
Wow.
He's now the longest tenured head coach in any of the major sports in North America.
You think about him, and then before that, it was Bill Cowher, right?
Yeah.
And Bill Cowher for his Browns coaching staff for a while. I think he grew up. Didn't Bill Cowher grow up here in Ohio?
Played for the Browns, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting.
I'm 55 years old, John, and the Steelers have had 3 coaches in my lifetime. That is my
Kevin,
mind.
I'm 55 years old as well, and let's see, the Browns have had I stopped counting years ago. That's too funny. Oh my gosh. Well, Kevin, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Any final thoughts on what you're doing with FSN or the Pittsburgh affiliate? Just want to share out. You can share out anything you'd like.
Yeah, but I run a podcast Monday through Friday called The Call Sheet Daily. It is not a Steelers podcast, Cleveland fans.
Okay.
It is a football podcast where we focus on scheme and on coaching and on fans' perspective and on global issues involving the sport of football. So I think it's a little bit different than a lot of the podcasts that are out there. So if you ever get a chance, The Call Sheet Daily on Spotify, Apple Music, etc.
Excellent. Well, have a very good rest of your day, Kevin. And thank you again for joining us here. We do want to give a shout out to Hemisphere Coffee Roasters. They shake the hand of the farmer, and you can catch our link on our X page. Go buy some coffee and support our Fanatical Elves Network. Thanks for being here, Kevin, again. This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast. Remember to keep smiling. See ya.
Thanks, John.